What if I told you it took her 40 years to realize she had an option?
I think the light switch didn't go on until I was like in my 40s. I'm like, I have an option here.
If you've been performing your whole life, if you've been the good girl, the strong one, the high achiever, this conversation is going to feel personal.
Sisters, hey, little girl, are you looking for hope?
Here at Stacy Speaks Hope, your little girl can find safety where she can reveal what's on her heart, what has been going on in her life that may be hindering her from being all that God called her to be. Our guest today, Dr. May, was overwhelmed personally by unexplained gut and joint issues, and she discovered tools that transformed her health and now helps others to do the same so they can reclaim their vitality by dealing with the root cause, healing. She's a future podcaster, an author, and a professor. Welcome, Dr. Indea. Introduce us to your little girl. What do you know about her? What do you remember?
Wow, my little girl. On the weekends, I remember my dad, he would cook breakfast and then we would smell the aroma, the breakfast coming up through the vents, and then all of a sudden we would hear, come and get it. And so my dad would call us and then we would all gather at the table and sit down and eat breakfast together. So that was like a family time after a busy hustle bustle week of school and, my parents going to work. That was really a time where we could all sit down and have a good time one on one with each other. It was just like a routine. And then on the weekends, like I said, Saturdays was family time and we would clean up. And then on Sundays would be church. And church was like getting ready for a little pageant. That we would have these pretty little dresses, lacy socks, and the shoes, and we were off to church on Sunday. All of us. It was four girls and my mom and dad, and we would be packed in that one car going to church. So growing up was nice. It was nice, structured. Let's put it like that. It was very structured though. Because, we had to get our homework done. Sometimes we had to fend for ourselves when my parents were at work when we would get home from school during the week. And my sisters and I, we did get along very well. We lived in a strict household. So I think that strict structure, it formed and shaped who I am today.
If you described the impact of living in a strict or structured household on your younger self, on your little girl, what three words come to mind?
So I could just say it was routine, it was loving, and it could have been a bit boring.
Okay. So something inside you is kind of like, let me do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Did that send a message to you about just how you presented yourself? Was there an unspoken expectation?
Yes, absolutely. So, from having that structure and, living like I did as a little girl, that did carry on into my like teenage years and adult years. Being unique was always me. I didn't want to like blend in with people. I like standing out wearing like unique jewelry or clothing and things like that. But it still stuck with me where I had to present myself in a certain way or look a certain way, dress a certain way before I actually went out into the world, so to speak. And I wanted to be well put together, and that went along with how I spoke, and everything. Like
So,
never leave out the house with your hair looking a certain way, with, being unkept. And so it put a lot of pressure, I think, on me as a person.
okay. As you had relationships with other young people, other children, other peers, and what was the impact of that? How were you received?
And so when we were younger, I don't think I really noticed it because, children would be children. You have fun. And my parents always taught us to love people. So we didn't look out of a lens where we judged people for what they had or what they didn't have or how they looked. But I can say it was competition in elementary school, middle school, as it related to like education wise. Cause like I would compete with my classmates who would get the best grade. And so it was pressure there,
Mhm.
but we were all like that. So, and then going into like my teenage years, I was still unique. So I really didn't care how other people dressed or what they had on. When people looked at me, they kind of admired my kind of style that I had. So I didn't have it there. And then leading into adulthood, once again, I guess I'm just grateful that I had that uniqueness.
Mhm. Good.
Because it is pressure when you're trying to fit in and be like everybody else. So, but I still had, don't forget that underlying, you got to look a certain way. You have to behave this way or you have to speak this way, having yourself put together. And that has carried along with me. And like I said, at times it can be very taxing or it can be stressful. Um, it can be exhausting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
As you say that, that it kind of leads into what I was thinking. Living that way, what does that do to you, your perception of yourself? Meaning, specifically, if you didn't present yourself a certain way, if you didn't get the best grades, what was the internal dialogue or the household dialogue to you, for you about that?
Hmm. So let's go with the household dialogue first. This is my little girl, right? Okay. So the household dialogue would just be, I don't remember any, discipline where I had bad grades because even I think I was harder on myself than my parents were on me. So I would be crying, or, I would cry if I didn't get the grades I want. And they're looking at me like, okay, you got a B, so what's so bad about that? So my mom was very supportive because she would be there tutoring us or helping us, and because she was also like an intellectual. So I think that's where we got it from, seriously. And so the dialogue there was okay. And behavior wise, we just knew get it together. And if one of my sisters got out of line, we saw it and we're like, "Ooh, I don't want to get in trouble, so I am not going to do that." So that kept us in our own lane. And as a little girl, and having three sisters, it was all different. We all had different personalities, so we all displayed different things to our parents. And I think since the expectations for me was, I thought they wanted me to be this kind of like perfect little girl with the good grades. I was like the intellect, so I made sure I showed up with the good grades. Now, that's not to say everything else was in order like it should have been. Yeah. And then, can you please repeat that question again so I can get the other part of it?
Far is perfect. Tell me more about the other places. So you got the grades, and your label in the household was the intellect, both personally and in the dynamics of. And where are you in the sisters? Are you oldest, youngest, or in the middle?
Yeah, so with the sisters, I am the second oldest. So I suppose that's the middle child. And yeah, so
So you got the middle
it
child,
was,
but you had your role,
yeah, I had my role.
and you owned it. It wasn't a battle. You were okay with
Mm-mm.
it. Okay. So that was part of
Yeah, but
identity.
yeah, but I still wanted to have fun. I still wanted to be a kid. So I still had my side of, having fun outside the house and, but when we get in the house, that's when we were like, we got ourselves together. And I think that's all children, right? So I presented what needed to be presented at home. Yeah.
So even
And I
that
know it was another part of that question.
that,
Hmm.
that shows an intellect that you had, a skill that you had to say, I want to do this. And in these places, that's acceptable. And at home, this is what's acceptable. So you had the ability to identity switch, for lack of a better term. We call it code switch usually, but you really are a different persona. What were the places, what were the things that you did that your parents had no idea that fit?
Oh, we like as a teenager, I think I had more fun than what they really wanted us to have in life because they wanted us to be, we were PK kids. And so they wanted us to be these representatives of Christ at all times. And I think growing up as a teenager and you know what you've been taught, and then you're exposed to other things. So it's like, you're like, is that real? Like, I've only been learning this at home, but what is that like? So then you dibble and dabble in things, or you're hanging around people that you shouldn't hang around that aren't the best, either representations of what teenagers should be at that time. So I didn't do anything like to get in any major trouble in my earlier teenage years, but it was after, when I was more in the 12th grade and going into college, I think I dabbled a little bit too much.
Was there anything inside of you that you started to be, I'll say, resistant to the image and the rules that you grew up with, or the expectations of yourself?
The pressure, and it became where sometimes I just wanted to relax and chill. And so I would take that hat off, so to speak, and I would be indie. So my name is India, but I would be indie. And with all my family member calls, they call me Indy. So whenever I was out and about, if anybody said Indy, I knew it had to be some kind of family relation, because otherwise I was India. And so the pressures, you do get exhausted. So then it was also procrastination. So if you know anything about like perfectionism, it causes procrastination. And so that was really heavy in my life where I knew I had these tasks and it would just take me forever to get started, forever to get through it. And so those kind of things were the internal struggles I had with it. So I just knew I had to get some kind of help. I knew I had to figure it out. But I was going like that for years, for
And
many years.
yes, that I mean, and it's solely because again, your identity, your perception of how you had to show up and be in the world, you had to be the intellectual, you had to be on, even to say that it was exhausting, you were tired. At what age did you start to feel like, man, I'm tired. I'm tired of always having to be top performing.
I think the light switch didn't go on until I was like in my 40s. I'm like, I have an option here.
Thank you, Dr. India, for sharing your journey. Thank you for the optimistic outlook, that healing, and wrapping that in gratitude. The healing process is seeing yourself through the lens that God created you divinely to be. Our listeners will have the opportunity. Do you want to share the name of your podcast in the future? So we'll be on the lookout for it.
My podcast to be is going to be called Radiance Unbroken.
Mm.
And so it will truly focus on the high performing woman and how dealing with the pressures and beauty of life and how you can overcome and how you can still make it through. And we'll touch bases on like your adrenal glands, cortisol levels, those important aspects of the physical health and how we can nourish them and help you live an optimum life. Hmm.
That's the beauty of your background. There's the integration of the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, that is not often packaged together. So I'm looking forward to hearing that podcast. I wish when I was back in my days of going through my kidney disease and all of that as a new mom, it was those things that I didn't know to identify. I didn't learn about the cortisol level till much, much later. and knowing that being stressed out, I did walk away from that saying stress will kill you. So when you said that at the beginning, that resonated with me. So thank you for sharing the tools that you use, that you offer. And if you're tuning in, please subscribe, like, and share. There's women in your life that you know, that you see, that you're friends with, that are going through this, living this way, and they need to hear those words that you don't have to do everything perfectly, that you are loved by God. Be blessed. Take the little girl games quiz because it just helps you see the ways you responded as a little girl, as a grown woman, and the patterns that show up that are sometimes painful and hurtful to both your body, your spirit, your relationship with God. It's quick, 7 questions. It might give you some insights. Thank you for watching Stacy Speaks Hope. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. To schedule a free coaching call, the link is in the description.